I would like to present our first presenter, Tzipora Rakedzon, who is starting her PhD at the Technion at the Department of
Preliminary research for I started my doctorate. I have been teaching a graduate writing course for about 5 years, and as a result, I became interested in teaching and assessment of writing in graduate students of science and engineering. I want to start by talking. I can go back. Okay. I want to start with just a general background. I know that we've been hearing about this, yesterday as well. Really, we want to teach scientists to write, and specifically, we want to teach scientists to be able to communicate with the public. Very often, the public think that scientists are like monsters or aliens. They don't want to communicate. They don't care about communicating. Perhaps they don't have the training to communicate. And while it's a very important part of their training as scientists and publishing for academia, it's also very important that they be able to transfer those writing skills to communicate with the general public as well. Yesterday we heard all kinds of comments supporting this idea. Sasha talked about implementation, that we're interested in implementation, and we had the example of Professor Gershoni, who decided to write about polio out of the interest of informing the public. And so the issue was obviously very clear. I just want to talk about what's been done previously. First of all, there's a whole host of how-to guides. Many of the how-to guides do deal with academic writing. However, there are also how-to guides for popular science as well. Also, lots of research has been done about the importance of communicating with the public. I've given you just a few examples here about the importance, about the duty to our citizens, about informing them, and letting them know where all their tax money is going. We also see, when we look at some very interesting numbers, that way below 1% of the academic papers are actually reaching the media. It's really an unbelievable number to see how little actually reach the public. And on an optimistic note, one study looked at scientists who do write for the public, who do participate in popular science writing, and found that they were also more prolific academic writers. And so there's something about writing and about developing your writing and your communication that's not only beneficial for the public and for citizens, but also beneficial for academia and their own careers as well. Overall, what is the aim? The aim is to see how graduate students can also improve their popular science writing while studying academic writing, which is pretty much their main interest. And so the question we're asking is, how does learning academic writing style and writing style in general affect popular writing ability? And how can it be taught in parallel with hopefully one not hurting the other? In order to talk about this, I just want to give you some brief background information that really what we're dealing with here are two genres. We're talking about genre, meaning the type of literary production, a type of writing. In this case, the type of context and the type of purpose. And we have the two kinds. We have the scientific, which refers to the academic, and we have the science, which refers to public and popular science communication. And then we need to talk about the genre shift. What happens when we expect scientists or ask scientists to go from scientific, academic, to popular? What happens? And research has shown that there are several problems. One problem is that very often when they do try to communicate with the public, they don't use a lot of the style aspects that are needed for the public to understand. In addition, the reason why this happens is that the style that they learn for academic is in contrast to the style that they really need to communicate with the public. And what's of interest to me is that style. What aspects of style should they learn? And what aspects of style should they change when moving from genre to I'm going to give you the general categories and the overall picture of what this shift entails. And so if we look at the academic genre, we see that they have to concentrate on technical jargon. They have a very strict structure. Typically it's called the IMRAD structure, the introduction, methods, results, and discussion. Another issue is a word of hedging, which for many of you is jargon. And so to tell you briefly, hedging are words of uncertainty. This could lead to, this may be, it might be, we believe, some, often, and that's very often an integral part of what we're doing in research. And they also learn something a little bit more technical, and that's to be concise. And very often, and the reason I talked about being concise, even though it's really good for any kind of writing, is very often the conciseness is a matter of vocabulary and technical words. On the other hand, if they look at the popular sciences, what do we need and what do they need to know? First of all, they have to realize that they have to define and explain a lot more. They have to remember which of the terms and which of the jargon they learned actually as they became scientists and what the general audience can read. Very often they have to think about journalistic techniques and not the typical IMRAD structure. Typical journalistic techniques like the WH questions, what and where and why. Very often what has happened, what literature has shown, is when we see a scientific paper written in journalistic or popular science style, we see things disappear like those hedges, which means that things become more certain. This is the way it is. This is what happens instead of it could be, it might be, we think. And very often as a result, things are exaggerated. And so what happens is that we end up with a style which is completely different, and sometimes really very in stark contrast to what the scientist wants to communicate. In addition, we also see things left out, methods often disappear, limitations often disappear, and instead emotional language comes in. This is the big picture. Specifically, I want to show you the aspects of style that we looked at and that we tried to encourage the students to use when talking about their research for a popular audience. And so we chose to look at 6 aspects, very similar to what I said to you a moment ago. And so you can see we talked about jargon, we talked about the uncertainty, we talked about methods which are often left out, but can actually be kept in as long as they are clear to the reader and not full of jargon. The need for explanation, for explaining difficult ideas, the need for application. Yesterday we also talked about implementation and having people understand why it's a part of their lives. And readability, which talks about how easily somebody can read the piece that's being written. So these are the aspects of the genre that we wanted to look at. And the question is, okay, how can we rate their abilities? And of course, rating their abilities, we had to look for some sort of a scale that could rate writing. And so I found in previous work done in Israel on writing, a scale that was used. That was basically a 1 to 4 scale, and I'll just run through it quickly. 4, a grade of 4, meaning the aspect of style was not used at all. 3 means it was used incorrectly. 2, it was used correctly, but not all of the time. And 1, it was used correctly. And so we used the scale to rate the different style techniques that I mentioned before. The only aspect that had a separate scale was readability. Readability already has an algorithm that's online, and Word uses it, for those of you who use Word. It's the Flesch-Kincaid Reading Ease Scale. Briefly, those of you who can use it, it's free. You can type in any text. It'll give you on a scale of 1 to 100 the difficulty or ease of the piece that you have written. It takes into consideration, let's just give you an example. It takes into consideration the length and the difficulty of your words. I do want to give you a quick example of how the rating works. Here's a good example of jargon and methods together, a very popular combination. Our approach is to combine inorganic material, zinc oxide, and organic material, polyethylene glacial diacid, for a creation of inorganic hybrid inhibitor. This is from a real student's test, and this was for a public general audience, and I can barely read it, and maybe 1 or 2 of you can actually understand what's going on. Obviously, they got a 3 used incorrectly, both for methods, because there's no way the general public can follow it, and for jargon as well. On a more positive note, sometimes methods are more easily conveyed. Look at part of this example. The conventional way of creating those artificial islands is by drying out a part of the sea with filling materials brought from the sea floor or from the land. Okay, something that everybody can follow, but still conveys the methods without using too much jargon. One more nice example of explanation and application. These are nanostructures smaller than the width of a human hair. Beautiful. Anybody who reads now knows what they mean by nanostructures. And finally, an application of helping managers make better decisions, something that all of us can really understand. We have 61 students in the spring semester who participated in the course and finished on time with all of the tasks, and so they were the ones included in our sample. They were given a pre and a post test to rate their writing. The pre-test asked them to talk about their research, both a paragraph for a general audience and a paragraph for an academic audience. You can see that throughout the semester they had a lesson on popular science and intervention. And you can see of the 4 groups, all 4 had a pre and post test with feedback. Only 3 had a lecture, 2 had a task, and only 1 had revision. Just to give you some preliminary results, we're just, again, continuing to look at what we've achieved. And we can see a trend. We can see a trend of students who are improving. Now the sample is small, but the idea to see is there a positive direction? Are they able, with a small intervention, to be able to handle both of the genres? And it looks like the group that had the task did have a slightly bigger improvement than those who did not. If we look at the 6 aspects altogether, we can see also that while it is less of a difference in group, we can see that all of the students are able to implement and become aware of the style that they need to use only by the end of the semester. Some highlights about what I saw from their pre and post tests. On one hand, I did notice the overall picture that much less jargon was being used. However, very often it wasn't enough for a general audience, even if they did get a slightly better grade. When it comes to methods, really the issue of methods and jargon are intertwined. They found it very difficult to be able to explain their methods without getting caught up all kinds of academic and technical terms. As for hedging, it was actually the uncertainty. I remind you the language of uncertainty. It was actually easier for them to transfer the uncertainty. They're very trained in their research to say that things might be and could be, and they weren't affected by the journalistic technique of we usually see it slightly over-exaggerating. And overall, if we look at the general picture and the positive trend, between 21 and 30% of students did improve their grade without specifically talking yet about how much they improved and the specific numbers. And we do see overall, by giving them a task, they were able to implement some of the techniques that we tried to communicate with them. And so overall, we can say that by giving them a task, even though it's only the beginning of a process, there is some awareness there, and there is some improvement. And really, if I think about the future, the issue is really what else do I want to look at? The individual grades, how much they actually improve, and I want to look at motivation. Is there an issue of motivation? Are they more motivated after they have taken the course, after they've had the intervention, after they've written the task? Or is there some sort of a motivation based on the field they come to, or the faculty, or their specific kind of research? Thank you.